I would like to introduce you to Tarket-Arruda and Gayle Waite. Gayle,
Wait. It's Wait.
Wait, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Gayle. They have written a book called Charlestown, Rhode Island Cemeteries. No, that's probably not the formal name, is it?
Yes.
Is it? Okay. And Lori's going to talk to you about her process that she took in order to write that book. So, without further ado, I will hand this over to Lori.
Good afternoon, and thank you for all coming. This is really, really nice. Gayle and Tom have been introduced. Tom is he will be holding up pictures. We'd like to thank the Quonochontaug Historical Association for having us, and thank you all for coming. When I first saw this cemetery, my husband and I were out for a drive. We were riding around here, and I said, gee, just let's stop and look at this cemetery, because it was on our list for the following summer to work in. And it was just as we expected it. It was covered with those horrible raspberry bushes and briars, and you could hardly see any of the stones. We saw maybe one or two, and that was it. So imagine our surprise when next summer we came here and it had transformed. It was gorgeous. Sherry Stabnick did everything right. The one thing she did, which was very important, was have the first 5 inches of dirt taken out of the cemetery, and that's very important. That's where all those nasty roots are. And if you don't take the root system out and you just, like the Boy Scouts go in and they cut the brush back, it's going to grow the next year. So you need to take that root system out, and that's what she did. And then she had someone come in and had the stone wall restored and a gate installed, and all for someone that she never knew. And that's what really touched us. And this is definitely the most beautiful cemetery in Charleston. And we have seen a lot. Normally, we can't identify who's in these fieldstone marked cemeteries. But this was the property of the Sheffield farm, and we felt pretty confident that this was the Sheffield family in here. So we did name it the Sheffield lot. There are 3 stones that have the last initial is S, so we were pretty confident about that. I wanted to note that the 3 carved stones that are in here were carved by a family member. These are very crude stones. You see a lot of them in the old fieldstone cemeteries. And one of the things is they would never carve the stones during the day, because the farm chores were much more important. So they would carve the stones at night. So that person was important enough to them that they wanted no one to forget where that person was. About a quarter of all the cemeteries in Charleston are fieldstone cemeteries. And unfortunately, we've lost a lot of history. But our great-great-great-great-grandparents, in their wildest dreams, never thought we would be looking for them or any information on them. All they thought about was today. That was what was important to them. And the gravestone just wasn't a priority. They might have been illiterate, too. And just the fieldstone was readily available to them. They used it. Or they felt their kin was buried, they knew where their kin was buried, and who else cared? The future Also, when we find a fieldstone cemetery, we dig in front of the stone to the depth of at least 6 inches. And that means if we have 100 fieldstone graves in a cemetery, we dig in front of every one of them, because the initials and the years are lost. This is because the fieldstone tends to settle quite a bit over the years. And if Tom could hold up.
And I will be moving this around.
Oh, wow.
So this is what we dig in front of the stones for.
Don't forget the ones back here.
Oh.
Where was that stone?
That stone was taken in Richmond. Fieldstone cemeteries, unfortunately, have gotten the reputation of being only Indian gravestones. And that's not the truth, really. All nationalities use them. And especially the Quakers. The Quakers were not allowed to have anything on their gravestones. So they use the fieldstones also. And we've been working on this project, Gayle and I, for, this is our 20th year. We started working in Hopkinton, where we both live. They were aware of 26 cemeteries, and we brought that up to 83. We had so much fun that we decided to do Charleston. And Charleston was aware of 46, and we brought that number up to 97. We still look forward to the adventure, so now we're in Richmond. And we certainly do have adventures, and I'll tell you a few of them. The first problem we encounter is finding the cemeteries. We work from directions that are in some cases 50 years old. And the problem with that is the road names aren't the same. John Brown's farm is now a housing development, and the telephone number, pole numbers have changed. Or we had a cemetery with no directions. They would just say the Peckham lot or the Clark lot, or so you just have to hope you find that. It takes a while to sort it all out. It usually takes us about 5 years in a town because I work full-time, Gayle's retired, and it's hard for me to balance work and then just have 1 day a week to go out in the cemeteries on a Saturday. And before we get there, we can't really judge the size. I mean, we went to a cemetery 2 weekends ago that they said they had like 39 burials. Well, they had 79 burials. So the 2 other cemeteries that we were going to look at that day fell to the wayside because we had to, do that cemetery properly, and that took us all day. And no matter how hard we work on this project, we can't accomplish what we do without the town's citizens. They are our most important asset that we have. We network with the elderly citizens, hunters, hikers, whoever we can think of that would help us find these old places. And when we believe that we've reached the end of the project, we literally go from street to street and look for an old house and stop and ask if they have a cemetery. And 6 out of 10 times they do. And they were never registered. So that's what we do. We find as many as we can. And there are some times when we walk all day and can't find a cemetery. And many of these cemeteries, they don't have a path leading to them. We're walking through woods that were once open fields. And now we're fighting all the underbrush and the briars and climbing over stone walls and, just to find these things. Oh boy, we've gotten into bees' nests, we've gotten caught in the rain, we've got snowed on, But we don't consider this time wasted. We see things that a large percentage of the population of Charleston will never see. We discovering a pond in the springtime, watching a mother duck and her ducklings, a field of wildflowers. We could be working in a pine grove, and you listen to the wind blowing through the pines, and it's really, really nice. The work is hard, yes, but we get a lot of happiness from it. We had one particular project to do in Charleston, and that was to find 4 cemeteries on a 300-acre parcel of land with no directions. People told us there was 4 back there, but they didn't know where they were. So it took 2 weekends to find the first one, and it was quite by accident. The first weekend we walked all over, we didn't find anything. The second weekend, we started out early. Gayle one way, I walk the other. We have walkie-talkies. We communicate with each other. And after about a half an hour, I put my backpack down to get a snack out. I start looking around. And right where I stopped were all fieldstones, right in a row. No fence around them, no gate, no nothing. What were the chances that I didn't walk for 5 more minutes and we never would have found that cemetery? So we think someone's helping us. And the next one was very, very odd. The day was very gray. It looked like it was threatening rain, and we, well, let's go out and do it anyway, and we'll go back to the car if it's raining. So we decided to take another foray through the woods, and this time we're together, and we walked about 5 hours, and it really looked like it was going to rain. So we had, as we went into this big parcel of land, we tied surveyor's ties to trees about 30 feet apart, so we could find our way out. And then we decided, oh, it really looks like rain, we're going to stop, and we untied all the survey ties as we were going out. And we came up upon this gully, and I stopped, and I looked at Gayle. I said, "There's no surveyor ties." And she said, "What do you mean?" She's like looking, and I'm looking, and we got the creeps, because a lot of things happen in the woods, believe me. We didn't know if somebody came in back of us and untied them. We just weren't sure what happened. As we're wondering what to do, all of a sudden the sun came out, as bright as anything. And there was a gravestone that was leaning just enough that the sunlight caught that gravestone. And I looked, I said, "Oh my gosh, Gayle, there's the cemetery." Just as I said that, the sun went back in, it got gray, and there was the surveyor tie. And it still makes the hair on the back of my neck, go up, because you really had to be there, and we were really a little nervous about that. But that was our second cemetery that we found. And we carry around with us about 15 pounds of equipment. One of the things is a bottle of water to clean the stones. And this full of water weighs 8 pounds. And we have everything in a backpack. We try to travel as light as we can, but sometimes we just can't. The next 2 that we had to look for in there were with the help of an elderly woman. When she was young, she used to take her children back to those farms and go blueberrying. So with the help of the cell phone and her on the other end, she kept us walking up the road. She said, by the way, what the path you're walking on was a road. Well, then that made sense to us. So she says, you need to find the farm barn foundation. You need to find the house foundation. And from there, she could bring us right in. She knew how many feet it was from those foundations. And that's how we found the last two. When we start working in the cemetery, we usually clean it up a little bit because we need to work in it. We need room to work in it. We want to make sure we see every stone. And we try to be aware of any historic plantings like flowering almond, daffodils, daisies. And what we do is before we actually start to document the cemetery, we take this, and for lack of anything else to call it, we call it our pokey stick, because we're poking in the ground and we're finding these that have sunk underneath the ground. And that takes a while depending on the size of the cemetery.
Can we show the people in the back?
Oh,
This is a pokey stick. Can you all see it?
Many of these old stones are hard to read. Even if they have initials, dates, carvings on them, they're hard to read. So what we do is we take the water, plain water, nothing else, and we use a natural bristle brush. Nothing steel, nothing plastic, just a natural bristle brush. You can pick these up at AC Moore. We go through a lot of them. We rub all the bristles off by the end of the summer. And that takes all the dirt off. And also it lets the dirt settle a little bit into the carving, and it becomes very clear to us. The other thing, if we can't really read it, we take a mirror. I don't know how good this is going to work in this cemetery, but we shine it in the sun, and the sunlight will rake across the stone and bring the lettering right out. So that's another thing we carry with us. But when you clean stone, you have to be pretty careful about cleaning them. Some of them we just don't clean because we're going to ruin them more. You don't want any damage to be done to the stone. You're taking away somebody else's history. So we just leave, some of them we just leave. Because of wind erosion, air pollution, acid rain, now that's the common enemy of the stone. And we take pictures of every one in the cemetery in general because someday they're going to be unreadable. And the Association of Gravestone Studies in Massachusetts reports that within 50 years there will be more damage to gravestones than has occurred in the last 200 years. We also take a GPS reading. I don't know who is familiar with a GPS, but it's a global positioning system. And we make sure that we take that reading so somebody can come out and find those again, those ones, especially those ones way out in the woods. Our cemetery is not only important for the information they hold, they're outdoor museums. And we note the gravestone material and note the carvers. But the early gravestone art is the earliest form of folk art in America, and Tom will be holding up another picture.
Where was that taken?
That was in probably Connecticut. And most carvers did not stay in one town because there just wasn't all that business, all that much business, but they traveled around from town to town. Each carver had his own distinct way of carving. They would make the angel's wings different. They would make the faces different. The eyes would be different. The hair would be different. And Tom has another one to show you. And see how the wings differ from the last picture. Each carver had in his own mind. Some even put borders on their stone, nice filigree borders. And I think the fun thing about this research is we just never know what we're going to find. And turn it the other way, yeah. And this guy we call the triangle guy only because we don't know what else to call him. He does not sign his work. He just has all his stones are the same sort of a face, but it's always a triangle stone. Now the next one, I think. Oh, no, one more I'm going to show you. No, that one you have in your hand there.
This one.
Yeah. The one that Tom has in his hand is a Stevens stone. Stevens did sign their work. It was grandfather, father, son who did that. William Stevens had a distinct style of lettering which he designed and always put a border around his work. The Stevens shop was in Newport and is still in existence at 29th Thames Street to this day. And they still hand carve. And imagine the trials. If you could afford a Stevens stone, imagine the trials to get one. Say there was one in here. One had to go to Newport and take a ferry to Jamestown, and from Jamestown take a ferry to Newport. Let's see, South Kingston to Jamestown to Newport, okay. And once you got to Newport, you put in your order. And whatever the arrangements were, the carvers might deliver the stone to the grave site, or they might make arrangements with you to pick it up at the dock. And then it had to be carried by horse and wagon to the grave site, and then when you're putting it in, you might break it. It's just amazing that they got here at all. Most carvers did not live as long as the elderly they were carving the stone for. Besides being tough on the joints, stone carvers died of silicosis, a lung disease brought on by the dust being inhaled from the stone cutting. And until recently, even large cemeteries did not keep maps of where the dead were buried. And there are two techniques that people use now to determine where the graves are. One is to have a bulldozer remove the first foot of earth, and the grave shafts will become apparent. They apparently, when you remove the dirt, it turns a different color when it gets oxidized, and then when you put the dirt back in it, it's just a different color. So you can see, you can count all your grave shafts that way. Another technique, and it's very, very expensive, is to bring in a special type of x-ray machine made just for this. And the machine rolls over the ground and picks up the images of the minerals that the body leaves behind. But it's very, very costly. I know in Hopkinton they've tried to like rent one or have somebody come in, and it's like $20,000 a day. So they really don't know where people are buried, and I guess it's not that important now. And it's amazing to us the tools that we used in 1992. We went around with a pencil and a camera and a notebook, and we had to learn how to use a computer to do our reports to send to the state. That was a big deal. To lay out the pages of our books, too, we had to use a computer. We had no cell phones, so Gayle would go one way, I would go the other, until we finally realized we needed walkie-talkies. And the GPS is a wonderful tool. It's hard to get lost if you have a GPS. And also, we put them on the town maps, so a developer can't come along and say, oops, I didn't know it was there. When we started in Hopkinton, we used camera with film in it. And much to our disappointment, we had to walk back out to many a cemetery and redo our pictures. Now we can tell right away whether we have a good picture or a bad picture. And we pay for all our equipment, tools, camera, GPS, and we pay out of pocket to publish our books. And speaking of pictures, when we were in Charlestown doing Tobias Saunders and his wife's grave, and we really liked them because they were so old and they were in such good condition. We wanted to feature them in our book. And every time we would get at first our film back, there would be something wrong with the picture. There would be it would be too hazy when it was a nice day out. It looked like somebody's thumb was over the lens. It was just, there was just something wrong with every one. So one day I went out there and Gayle thought I was a little crazy, and I said, look, guys, if it doesn't come out this time, you're not getting in book. The pictures came out perfect. A lot of planning goes into this. We start planning in January, and we fill up our calendar like we do it every other Saturday, or maybe we think we're going to have a lot of energy for 3 weekends in a row, but we plan that in January. And we start in April before the leaves come out, and we look for the cemeteries that are deep in the woods. After the leaves come out, we look for the ones that are less than 800 feet off the woods. And of course, the ones right by the road or in the large public ones, we wait till the hunters are out in the woods. Those are the ones we do. We do the ones close to the road and in the larger cemeteries. And it's hard to work around family obligations, especially in the summer when there's so much going on, but we do it. And occasionally we come across a vandalized cemetery, and when we do, we have to find every single piece of those gravestones, and we have to match them up. We match them up by the lettering, and that usually will take us a couple of weekends, depending on the damage. But we do it. We want to get as much accomplished in a cemetery that we can. Unfortunately, when we find so much destruction, these gravestones no longer mark a grave. They're at best memorials, because we don't know where to put them back to. And much of the misinformation from past recordings have come from not cleaning the stones. And all, like I said, is needed is plain water and a natural bristle brush. And in the past, 3s were mistaken for 8s, and 4s were mistaken for 1s. And by cleaning them, we can see the thin lines that were otherwise hidden by years of dirt and mold. And the green lichen, can you find a picture with the green lichen? Yeah, that's the one. Now that was unreadable. So that's a little more time consuming to clean up. We don't use the brush on that. What we do is we spray it with warm water and we let it sit for a while to soften up. Now we use a popsicle stick and we take all that lichen off. And that, the stone was probably about this high. And it took us a half an hour to get one stone cleaned, and then we had many after that we had to do. We record the material the stone is made of.
Where was that?
That was over in North Stonington. And then I need that red sandstone one. And this is sandstone. It's very porous. It does not hold up to weather well. But that shows us that someone was trading with the Connecticut Valley. That's where the sandstone comes from. And the next one I need, Tom, is the blue stone. Nope, the one after that. Yeah. And these bluish stones are made of metal and are hollow, and they hold up very well. But were not used for very long, maybe a 20-year period or so. And we call them zinkies only because they're metal and we don't know what else to call them. We have nicknames for everything. Each layer screws together. And that was very important during Prohibition because people unscrewed these layers and they would hide their rum or whatever they were trying to hide inside the zinkies. And then this stone is very unusual. It's very beautiful. It's a Stevens stone. It's very expensive, but there's something wrong with it. It's a woman's stone, and in the old days, women belonged to somebody, whether it was a daughter or a wife. And this woman does not have any of that on there. It just says she died. And she was 23. And someone had enough money to buy her a stone, but not put down who she belonged to. And during the 1800s, granite stones that you see the most became very popular. They weren't carved by hand. They were machined, and the gravestone carver had many blanks in his shop, and they would have like an icon on the top, epitaphs on the bottom, and the family would pick out one that suited their loved one, and the carver would machine the information onto the stone. Now, one of these stones in 1840 cost $30. So $30 was really a lot to spend. You know, it's either food or a gravestone. We also recorded the epitaphs in Charleston. The epitaph is also important. It gives us a hint of what the religious air was like, or it gives the family a chance to add something humorous, or it can be a way of putting a grieving family's anger at losing their loved one into a socially acceptable form. Okay. We wrote the Charleston book a little bit different because it was going to be very thin. We decided to write it as a storybook. It has colored pictures in it. And everybody really that has one says they enjoy it. And so, as Robert Frost put it, we have taken the road less traveled, and it has made all the difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori, very, very much. And thank you, Gail. And Tom, too. I think Lori brought a few of her books if anybody's interested in just looking at what she's done. And Gail's book.
One more question.
Yes, one more question.
Is the Dingle Cemetery in the book?
Yes, the Dingle Cemetery is in the book. Right.